The Sadness is the latest Shudder release, making massive waves in the horror community, and to call it shocking is a gross understatement. The film follows a young couple as they try and find their way back to each other after a viral outbreak. The city around them erupts into chaos, with the infected turning to murderous lunatics hell-bent on inflicting pain and torture on anyone who crosses their path by way of committing unspeakable acts of violence. Just before I jump into this review, if you're new here, I'm Emma and this is Sketchy Ed, where I discuss and review films in the horror and thriller space. I love all things dark, creepy, and disturbing, so if you like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe to keep updated on my channel. Released earlier this month, The Sadness is the directorial debut of Canadian filmmaker Rob Jabbaz. Despite being Canadian, the film itself is set in Taipei, Taiwan's capital city, with the characters speaking Mandarin. I thought this was interesting, but upon further reflection, I do have a theory which I'll discuss later on. The film is inspired by Garth Ennis's Crossed comic series, and it's extreme in every sense of the word. The Sadness first popped up on my radar after watching a review by Mike at Rotted Reviews. While he did praise the film, he did warn that it wasn't for everyone and gave several content warnings. In the weeks that followed, I saw more or less of the same thing from other reviewers. Initially, I was undecided whether I was going to even watch the film due to all the warnings, and believe me, they are well placed and for good reason. But eventually I was worn down and nervously gave it a go. What ensued in the 99 minutes that followed was relentlessly brutal, and there was so many moments where my jaw just hit the floor. Not only is this film ultra violent in terms of blood, guts, and gore, but it also frequently depicts sexual violence and super derogatory language. I couldn't believe the lengths that this film went to. It seemed like nothing was off the cards. I kept thinking to myself how bold it was to put out something as twisted and depraved as this, especially as a directorial debut. So you're probably wondering after all of that where I landed in my opinion of this film. Well, I'm happy to report that despite my fears, the film was nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be, largely due to hyping myself up so much beforehand, and overall I enjoyed the experience. So I'm going to start talking about what I liked about The Sadness. Right off the bat, one of the major highlights of this film is the violence and gore. Obviously. The carnage begins pretty early on in the piece, and up that point on, there's very little pause. There's some pretty unique and downright horrendous injuries and kills in this, and the special effects are just incredible. They're practical effects for the most part, and they're just crazy good. There was blood and guts by the bucketfuls, and I was super impressed, albeit disgusted. The character design was simple yet effective, with the infected being characterized by dark-colored eyes, what looks to be tears melting down their cheeks, and polished off with an absolutely maniacal smile. The film is described as a zombie film, but these aren't your typical stock standard zombies. They still have critical thought, and my take on this whole design was that the black eyes represented the darkness of the soul taking over, the tears for the inner turmoil that the character was experiencing, and the smile simply because they're unhinged and relishing in the destruction. I also appreciated the tone of the film. It would fluctuate between being serious and comical, which I thought was a good choice. It made the experience more bearable, so to speak, by making it lighter and fun, if that's the correct word to use without sounding like a psychopath. The film's title is kind of misleading, as it doesn't exactly evoke the feeling of sadness per se, more like repulsion and shock. In addition to this, it was fast-paced and I never felt like it was dragging. I also liked how the film ended. I'll just leave it at that to avoid spoilers, but I was satisfied and disturbed. When it comes to criticisms of the film, the number one most obvious reason that some audiences won't like this is because it crosses the line of being exploitative. Wait a second, that's an understatement. Not only does it cross this line, rather it catapults itself across it with absolutely no apologies or hesitation. Because of this, it's definitely an acquired taste, and it won't necessarily appeal to the masses. It's going to offend people and upset them and piss them off. For me personally, while I did generally enjoy most of the film, there were parts that did feel like they were a little bit too much. It felt like it was being shocking just for the sake of being shocking. This is especially true when it comes to the graphic language that is used throughout the film. In my opinion, it's actually the most shocking part of it. This brings me to my theory I alluded to earlier of why I think it's set in a foreign country with a foreign language. Because the language that's used is so foul and disgusting, I think by making it subtitled so English-speaking audiences have to read it as opposed to hear it, it made it more palatable. I mean, I'm not sure how this is being received by audiences that do speak Chinese and Mandarin, because I imagine to be way more confronting for them. So it'd be interesting to see how they take it. And yeah, that's just my theory. The film also didn't have a particularly strong or original plot. Like other disaster movies, we've got these two characters who are trying to make their way back to each other while all this chaos is happening around them. And that's pretty much all there is to it. But you know, people aren't watching this for a deep, complex storyline. They're watching it for the violence and the gore, and it definitely gives the people what they want to see. Overall, The Sadness is an extreme horror film that's guaranteed to divide audiences. People are going to either love it or hate it. It's all about the shock factor, and there is no holds barred. The violence and gore, both on screen and implied, is unrelenting, and the language is super derogatory, especially against women. It's really no surprise why there's been a slew of trigger and content warnings against the film. It's definitely not for the sensitive or faint of heart. However, for the gore hounds and fans of extreme cinema, this one will be right up your alley. It's unapologetic and will continue to blow your mind right up until the very end. What makes this film stand out from other films of the same nature is its special effects. They're absolutely top tier and will make you recoil in all its bloody glory. I give The Sadness a personal score of 7 out of 10. What can I say other than, wow, that was intense. I'm going to echo other reviewers by saying that this isn't a film that I'd feel comfortable with recommending to people just because it is so extreme. But I personally did enjoy it, and I'd probably watch it again. One thing's for sure, I'm super interested to see what Rob Jabbaz does next. I mean, where to from here? Anyway, I hope you liked my review. If you've seen the movie, I'd love to hear what your thoughts were in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.